The sentence landed heavier than the rain pounding the windshield, heavier than the years I had spent learning how to breathe quietly around grief. We were 3 states from home, a flickering vacancy sign buzzing like a tired insect, and the night felt too narrow for the weight of everything unsaid. If you have ever been trapped between who you were and who you are trying to become, you will understand why that moment felt like a cliff edge. And if you believe in kindness and second chances, take a second right now to like, comment, share, and subscribe to this channel, because stories like this survive only when people choose to listen. My name is Nathan Caldwell, and the road had been my refuge since my father passed. He remembered the routes and the rhythms of travel, the way the highway opens a person up, the way a horizon can forgive you. When he died suddenly in a small Ohio hospital, the maps folded themselves into boxes, and my world shrank to paperwork and condolences. My stepmother, Rebecca, had been in my life since I was 12, since the year my mother's absence turned from a wound into a scar. She was patient in a way that never announced itself, steady like a lighthouse you only notice when the fog rolls in. But patience does not erase distance. After my father's funeral, the house filled with quiet corners we didn't know how to cross, and I took a job offer in Chicago partly because the city felt large enough to swallow my sadness. The trip that night wasn't planned as a pilgrimage. Rebecca had called weeks earlier, her voice careful, asking if I could drive with her to North Carolina to sort through my father's last unfinished matters, a storage unit he'd forgotten, a box of letters he'd promised to organize. I agreed because saying no felt like another loss. We drove through Indiana cornfields and Kentucky hills, the radio low, the sky changing colors like a slow bruise healing. By the time the storm caught us near the Virginia border, exhaustion had turned our words into nods. Every hotel we tried was full, a parade of neon apologies. When we finally found one with a vacancy, the clerk's shrug sealed the night's shape. Inside the room, the air smelled faintly of detergent and rain. The bedspread was patterned with a design meant to distract you from its age, and the window hummed with passing trucks. The challenge wasn't the room itself, it was the echo of assumptions, the memories that pressed in when privacy vanished. I had learned early that grief can make people suspicious of their own hearts. I stood by the window pretending to check the weather, my reflection fractured by the glass, while Rebecca moved with the quiet efficiency of someone used to making do. The struggle wasn't about space, it was about trust. Not the kind you announce, but the kind you practice when nobody is watching. Rebecca took the armchair without comment, folded a blanket with care, and laid it across her lap as if drawing a line that didn't need to be spoken. In that small act, something loosened inside me. Respect can be louder than reassurance. We slept in shifts, the television murmuring through a late-night sermon and an old black-and-white movie, the kind my father loved. When dawn crept in, it carried with it the gentlest relief. The morning brought coffee strong enough to wake the dead, and the sky scrubbed clean. We drove on, and somewhere between a rest stop and a roadside diner, Rebecca told me stories I had never heard. She spoke of my father before he learned to hide his fears behind jokes, of the summer he taught her to swim in Lake Erie, of the promise he made to always choose patience over pride. She spoke without embellishment, and I realized how little I knew about the woman who had chosen to love a ready-made family. I shared my own truths in return, the nights in Chicago when loneliness pressed like winter, the anger I had aimed at the world because it was easier than aiming it at death. The storage unit was a metal rectangle of dust and memory. Inside were boxes labeled in my father's careful handwriting, and one unmarked carton that sat heavier than the rest. We opened it together and found letters he had written to me but never sent, folded like prayers. He wrote about his mistakes, his hopes, his belief that families are not finished things but living projects. He wrote about Rebecca with a tenderness that reframed every quiet moment I had misread. As I read, the tight knot I carried began to unravel. Grief does not disappear, but it can change its posture. On the drive back, the road felt different, as if it had learned our names. We stopped at a small church in Tennessee because the doors were open and the pews were cool. No words were exchanged there, but something settled between us like a shared understanding. Kindness is not dramatic, it is durable. It survives cramped rooms and long silences. It shows up with a blanket folded just so, with a willingness to listen without correcting. The second night we found another hotel, and this one had 2 rooms. It felt like a gift, but it also felt unnecessary. The distance that once felt dangerous now felt negotiable. We ate takeout on the tailgate of the car, watching fireflies stitch light into the dark, and laughed at how tired we were. Laughter surprised us both, arriving without permission. When it faded, what remained was peace. As we crossed back into Ohio, I realized the trip had given me more than closure. It had given me a way forward that included the people I thought grief had taken from me. Rebecca was not a placeholder in my story, she was a co-author, and I was no longer a child orbiting loss, but an adult capable of choosing trust over fear. If this story is stirring something in you right now, if it reminds you of a road you've traveled or a room that changed you, please take a moment near the end of this video to like, comment, share, and subscribe. Your engagement tells us that these quiet, human moments matter, and it helps us keep telling them. Before we close, here's a special request. Please comment with the word grace if this story touched your heart, and share what kindness has looked like in your own life. We reached home at sunset, the house welcoming us with its familiar creaks. The boxes found their places, the letters found a drawer I would open again on hard days, and the silence no longer felt hostile. It felt earned. The night that began with a single room ended with a wider world, one where respect carved space for healing and love learned how to stand without shouting. And that, I have learned, is how families become whole again.